The forgotten world. The planet was silent. It had no name, no records in any galactic database. To the universe, it didn't exist. It was just another forgotten world, a rock drifting in space. But deep beneath its surface, hidden away from time, something was waiting. Something no one remembered, until now. Captain Elias Carter sat in the command chair of the Starfire, his fingers tapping lightly against the armrest. His ship was one of humanity's best, a long-range exploration vessel built to travel deep into unknown space. But this mission was different. This mission wasn't about exploring. It was about recovering something that had been lost. "Captain, we're approaching the planet," said Lieutenant Rena Vasquez, the ship's navigator. Still no signs of life, no signals, nothing. Elias narrowed his eyes at the view on the screen. The planet was covered in thick, swirling clouds, its surface barely visible. It looked dead. But if the rumors were true, then something was down there, something important. "Take us into orbit," Elias ordered. "Scan for any structures or anomalies." The ship moved closer, breaking through the atmosphere. The scanners hummed as they searched the surface. For a long moment, there was silence. Then, a beep. "Captain, I found something," said Rena. "There's a structure down there. Artificial. It's old, but it's intact." Elias leaned forward. A forgotten world with an ancient structure. This was getting interesting. "Send a probe," he said. A small drone launched from the ship, speeding down toward the surface. The crew watched as it descended through the thick clouds, scanning everything in its path. When it finally reached the ground, the images it sent back made Elias's breath catch. The structure was massive. Black metal towers rising from the ground, covered in dust and vines. It didn't look like any human design. It was alien. "Rena, what species built this?" Elias asked. Rena shook her head. "No matches in the database. This isn't from any known civilization." That made Elias uneasy. The galaxy was full of dangers, hostile species, deadly weapons, forgotten technology that should stay forgotten. "Captain," called out Ensign Malik, the ship's communications officer. His voice was tense. "I think you need to see this." Elias turned. Malik's screen showed something shocking. Writing. Alien symbols carved into the metal of the structure, but underneath them, scratched into the surface with crude, uneven strokes, were words written in English. "HFY." The crew went silent. "What the hell?" Rena muttered. "Who wrote that?" Elias's mind raced. If someone had written those words, then they had to be human. But how? No human colonies had ever been recorded here. No missions, no settlements. "Malik, run a life sign scan," Elias ordered. Malik's fingers flew over the controls. The screen blinked. Then, an alarm sounded. "Captain," Malik said, his voice tight. "There's something alive down there." The bridge was deadly quiet. "How many?" Elias asked. Malik hesitated. "Just one. Faint signal. Weak." Elias exchanged a look with Rena. A single life sign. On a forgotten planet. In an alien ruin. And someone had scratched HFY into the wall. "Prepare a landing team," Elias said. "We're going down." The crew moved quickly. Within minutes, Elias and a small team were suited up and inside the shuttle. The descent was rough. The atmosphere was thick, the wind strong. But soon, the ground came into view. The landscape was eerie. Dark clouds swirled in the sky, casting shadows over the land. The air was thick with dust, and in the middle of it all, the massive alien structure stood like a monument to something long forgotten. The shuttle touched down with a soft thud. The ramp lowered. Elias stepped out first, his boots crunching against the rocky ground. The structure loomed over them, silent and ancient. "Stay alert," he said. "We don't know what we're dealing with." The team moved forward, weapons ready. The entrance to the structure was open, like a mouth waiting to swallow them whole. Inside, the air was stale, the walls covered in strange alien markings. But the most disturbing thing was the writing in English. More words scratched into the walls. They are watching. We are not alone. Run. Elias felt a chill run down his spine. Someone had been here, and they had been afraid. Then a sound, a faint, ragged breath. Over there, Rena pointed. In the shadows, barely visible, something moved. Elias stepped forward, his heart pounding. Lying against the wall was a person, a human, a man, thin and weak, his clothes tattered, his face pale. His eyes flickered open as he saw them, and his lips trembled. "You came," the man whispered. Elias knelt beside him. "Who are you? What happened here?" The man's breathing was shallow. He grabbed Elias's arm with surprising strength. His eyes were wide, filled with terror. "You have to leave," he gasped, "before they wake up." Elias frowned. Who's waking up?" The man's grip tightened. "The ones who took us." Then a deep rumbling noise echoed through the structure. Something was waking up. The ground trembled beneath their feet. Elias Carter tightened his grip on his rifle, his heart pounding as the deep rumbling noise echoed through the massive alien structure. The weakened man in front of him shivered, his fingers digging into Elias's sleeve. "They're waking up," the man whispered, his voice hoarse and filled with terror. "You need to run. Now." Elias exchanged a glance with Lieutenant Rena Vasquez. She was already scanning their surroundings, her weapon raised. The rest of the team was tense, their fingers hovering over the triggers of their rifles. "What's waking up?" Elias demanded. "Who took you?" The man struggled to breathe, his body shaking with exhaustion. "They're not dead," he gasped. "They were just sleeping." A loud clank echoed through the chamber. Then another, and another. Elias turned toward the sound. Shadows stretched along the walls as something massive shifted deeper inside the structure. Dust fell from the ceiling. The air grew heavier. "Malik, report." Elias barked into his comm. "Sir, the scanners just went crazy." Malik's voice crackled through the earpiece. Energy readings spiking. Multiple movement signatures beneath the surface. It's like the whole place is coming alive. Elias cursed under his breath. This was bad. They had walked straight into something ancient and dangerous. "Fall back to the shuttle," he ordered. Rena moved to help the injured man, but he weakly shook his head. No, I can't leave," he whispered. "They'll follow." "Who?" Rena asked urgently. Then, from the darkness, a clicking noise. Sharp, repetitive, like claws tapping against metal. The team froze. A shape moved in the shadows. A figure tall and thin, its limbs too long, its head slightly tilted as it watched them. Glowing blue eyes flickered to life in the darkness. Then more eyes opened. Dozens, hundreds. The sleeping ones had awakened. "Contact," one of the soldiers shouted, raising his weapon. A piercing shriek filled the chamber, and suddenly, the shadows exploded with movement. The creatures rushed forward, their skeletal forms unnaturally fast. Their jagged limbs scraped against the walls, their mouths lined with rows of needle-like teeth. "Open fire," Elias roared. Gunfire erupted in the chamber, the bright flashes of plasma bolts lighting up the darkness. The first wave of creatures shrieked as they were torn apart, their bodies collapsing into the dust. But more kept coming. "Move! Get out of here!" Elias shouted. The team fell back toward the exit, firing as they went. Rena dragged the weakened man with her, struggling to keep up. The creatures swarmed from the walls, climbing over one another, their glowing eyes locked onto the intruders. Elias fired shot after shot, but they just kept coming. Then the ground shook violently. A deep roar vibrated through the chamber. Something bigger was waking up. "Captain, we've got a bigger problem." Malik's voice shouted through the comm. A massive energy spike below the surface. Something huge is about to break through. Elias didn't wait to find out what it was. "Run," he bellowed. The team sprinted toward the entrance, gunfire echoing behind them. As they burst into the open air, the landscape around them trembled. The alien structure moved. Metal plates shifted, ancient mechanisms grinding to life. The entire ruin was a machine, and it had been activated. The shuttle was waiting a few meters away, its engines humming. The pilot, Lieutenant Harris, waved frantically from the ramp. "Get in, now." The team scrambled up the ramp as the ground split apart beneath them. Black tendrils of metal and energy surged upward, wrapping around the ruins like a monstrous cocoon. The air vibrated with an otherworldly hum. As the shuttle lifted off, Elias looked down. The structure was changing. It was no longer a ruin. It was rebuilding itself. And at its core, something massive was stirring. The forgotten world was no longer forgotten. It had awakened, and whatever had been sleeping here was looking right at them. The shuttle rocketed through the darkened sky, its engines roaring as it escaped the surface of the forgotten world. Inside, Elias Carter and his team were catching their breath, their faces pale from what they had just witnessed. Below them, the alien ruins continued to shift, their ancient mechanisms grinding and twisting, reforming into something new, something alive. What the hell was that? Rena Vasquez gasped, still gripping her rifle tightly. "The beginning of something bad," Elias muttered. The injured man they had rescued shivered, his eyes unfocused. "It's awake," he whispered, "and it won't stop now." Elias knelt beside him. "What do you mean? What did we wake up down there?" The man swallowed hard, his breathing shaky. "A warning," he finally said. "We were never supposed to come here. This place, it was a prison." The word sent a chill through the entire team. "A prison," Malik repeated. "For what?" The man looked up at them, his eyes full of fear. "The ones who came before us. They locked something away here. Something too powerful to destroy. They thought if they buried it deep enough, no one would ever find it." Elias clenched his jaw. "But someone did." The man gave a weak nod. "A scouting ship, just like yours. They landed here by accident, searching for lost technology. But they triggered the first awakening." He shuddered. "And they never made it back." Rena exchanged a worried glance with Elias. "Then how did you survive?" The man hesitated. "I didn't," he finally admitted. "I was taken." Silence filled the shuttle. The implications were clear. Elias rose to his feet, turning toward the cockpit. "Harris, what's our status?" The pilot's voice came through, tense. "Something's wrong, Captain. The planet's gravity just changed. It's getting stronger, like it's pulling us back." Elias felt the weight in his stomach shift. The shuttle jolted slightly, its thrusters struggling against an invisible force. "That's impossible," Malik said, checking the instruments. "A planet's gravity doesn't just change like that." The injured man let out a hollow laugh. "It's not a planet," he murmured. A heavy silence settled over them. Then, a new sound filled the cockpit, a deep, resonating hum, vibrating through the ship like a heartbeat. Elias turned to the viewport. The surface below was no longer just shifting, it was rising. The ancient structures were climbing into the sky, forming massive towers of metal and energy. Lightning crackled through the air as an enormous form emerged from the center of the ruins. It was unlike anything Elias had ever seen. Part machine, part organism, its body twisting with black and silver tendrils. Then it opened its eyes. Two massive, burning red orbs stared straight at them. A single word appeared on the shuttle's screen, written in an unknown language. Then it translated itself. "We see you." Alarms blared. The shuttle jerked violently. Harris shouted, "Captain, we've got incoming." Elias barely had time to brace himself before something massive shot up from the planet's surface, black tendrils of metal reaching toward them with terrifying speed. Full thrust. Get us out of here, Elias roared. Harris yanked the controls, pushing the engines to maximum power. The shuttle rocketed away just as the tendrils nearly closed around them, snapping like jaws. They barely made it. The forgotten world vanished beneath them as they broke through the atmosphere. The team let out a collective breath of relief. But Elias knew the truth. This wasn't over. Something had awakened, and now it was watching. The shuttle shot through the void of space, its engines burning at full power. Elias Carter stood near the cockpit, gripping the back of Harris's seat. His knuckles were white. Below them, the forgotten world was no longer still. Massive black structures had risen from its surface, twisting into impossible shapes, pulsing with an eerie red glow. The thing they had awakened was alive, and it was aware. "We need to send a warning," Elias said. Reina Vasquez, still shaken, tapped furiously on the comms console. "I'm trying, but something's jamming long-range signals." "Jamming?" Malik frowned. "There's nothing down there capable of that." The injured survivor, the man they had barely managed to rescue from the ruins, let out a dry, bitter laugh. "You still don't understand," he muttered. "It's not a planet. It's not ruins. It's a mind." Elias turned to him sharply. "What are you saying?" The man locked eyes with him. "You think you're escaping. You're not. It let you leave." A heavy silence filled the shuttle. Then the cockpit screen flickered. Lines of alien text flashed across the display, shifting and twisting until they formed a message in perfect English. "You should not have come." A chill ran down Elias's spine. "Shut it off," he ordered. Harris's fingers flew over the controls. "I am." "It's not responding." The screen flickered again. More words appeared. "You have seen. You have spoken. Now you will carry the message." Then the screen went dark. Reina exhaled. What does that mean?" The injured man swallowed hard. "It means we're already infected." Before anyone could respond, an alarm blared. The ship rocked violently. "Proximity alert," Harris shouted. "Something's." The ship's exterior cameras activated. The crew watched in horror as something emerged from the forgotten world's orbit. A ship. No, not a ship. A construct, a monstrous fusion of metal and living matter, shifting and reforming as it moved. It had no engines, no visible thrusters. Yet it was moving, closing in on them at terrifying speed. Elias grabbed the comms panel. "If we can't send a message, we'll bring one back ourselves. Punch in a course for Earth." "Now." Harris hesitated. "What if we bring it with us?" Elias's face hardened. "Then humanity needs to be ready." The engines roared to life. The shuttle surged forward, breaking into faster-than-light travel. Behind them, the construct hovered in space, watching, waiting, and deep in the darkness of the forgotten world, something laughed. The ship hurtled through the void, faster than light, but the crew knew speed alone wouldn't save them. Something had seen them. Something had marked them. Elias Carter stood at the center of the bridge, staring at the flickering monitors. The dark shape of the construct, no, the thing that had emerged from the forgotten world, still burned in his mind. "Status," he demanded. Harris was pale, his hands shaking as they hovered over the controls. "We're on course for Earth, but—" He hesitated. Elias's patience was wearing thin. "But what?" "The sensors are acting strange. I don't think we left that thing behind." The injured survivor, the one they had rescued from the ruins, sat strapped into a chair. His breathing was uneven, his face coated in sweat. "You didn't escape," he muttered. "You were allowed to leave." Reina turned sharply toward him. "What do you mean?" The man lifted his trembling hand and pointed to the screen. The crew followed his gaze. At first, the space outside their ship seemed empty. Endless stars stretched in every direction. But then, a shadow moved. No, not a shadow. A presence. It wasn't just following them. It was inside the ship. The lights flickered. A deep, unnatural hum vibrated through the hull. Then a voice, whispering, crawling through their minds. "You are the message." The injured man convulsed. His eyes turned completely black. His body stiffened, his mouth stretching in an unnatural, empty grin. Then he spoke, but the voice was not his own. "You carry us home." The ship's alarms blared. Systems shut down one by one. The hum turned into a low, droning pulse, as if something massive was awakening around them. Elias grabbed Rena's arm. "Tell me you have a way to stop this." She was frozen in place, staring at the black-eyed man. I don't know what this is." The man let out a rattling laugh. His head tilted, his voice twisting. "Earth will hear us. Earth will see us." A deep, consuming dread settled over the crew. They hadn't just escaped. They had brought something back. And soon, Earth would know the nightmare had only just begun. The ship drifted through space, silent except for the distant hum of failing systems. The crew huddled near the control panel, their faces pale under the flickering emergency lights. The injured survivor, the one who had spoken in the unnatural voice, sat motionless, his black eyes staring into nothing. Elias Carter clenched his fists. "We need to contain this. Whatever this is." Rena was already working on the problem. "I've isolated the affected systems, but it's spreading. The ship isn't just malfunctioning. Something is inside our systems. Inside him." She nodded toward the man strapped to the chair. Harris, his fingers trembling, typed frantically on his console. "It's not just the ship. It's broadcasting. A low-frequency signal. I don't know who or what it's calling." Elias's stomach twisted. "Shut it down. Now." "I'm trying." Harris's voice cracked. "But it's rewriting itself." The ship shuddered. A deep, distant sound, like 1,000 whispers merging into one, vibrated through the hull. Then the injured man's head snapped up. His black eyes locked onto Elias. "You do not stop us." The ship's lights cut out. For a brief, terrifying moment, there was nothing but absolute darkness. Then, movement. Shadows stretched unnaturally, shifting like they had a will of their own. A shape slithered along the ceiling, shifting between solid and mist. The air grew thick, pressing against their lungs. Then came the voices. "We are coming. We see you. Earth will open the door." Panic seized the crew. Harris scrambled to reboot the controls. Rena pulled out a weapon, though it felt useless against whatever this was. Elias grabbed the nearest communication panel. "This is Captain Elias Carter of the Vanguard. We have encountered an anomaly. We are under attack from an unknown entity. Warning to Earth, do not." Static swallowed his words. The signal cut. Then the injured man, if he could even be called that anymore, began to laugh. It was not human. Not anymore. The ship was no longer theirs. It pulsed with something wrong, something ancient. The walls groaned as if the metal itself was alive, shifting with an unseen force. The emergency lights flickered in the suffocating darkness. Elias Carter gripped the control panel, his knuckles white. Every screen showed static. Every system was failing. And the man in the chair, the thing he had become, was still laughing. Harris was trembling. We need to stop this." Rena had her weapon raised, but her hands shook. "Tell me how." "We shoot him. We eject the ship into the void." "None of this makes sense." Elias clenched his teeth. "Sense doesn't matter anymore. Survival does." Then the ship shuddered. Not from an explosion. Not from an impact. From something arriving. The air itself grew heavier. A deep vibration filled the ship, not from the engines, but from outside. No, from everywhere. Then the voice returned. "You are the key." The man in the chair lifted his head, his black eyes locking onto Elias. His mouth stretched into a grin too wide, too unnatural. "And the door is open." The walls of the ship rippled. The darkness outside wasn't just space anymore. It had depth, a void stretching far beyond human understanding. And from that void, something moved. Rena gasped. "Oh my God." Harris was hyperventilating. "This isn't real. This isn't real." Elias forced himself to look. He wished he hadn't. Shapes crawled from the abyss, tall, thin, shifting forms, their bodies flickering between solid and mist. They had no faces, only the suggestion of features, watching them. Then the first one stepped inside the ship. Reality bent. The walls stretched. The floor cracked open into a swirling void. Elias grabbed Rena's arm, pulling her back as the darkness pulled. Harris screamed as he lost his footing. Elias lunged for him. Too late. Harris's body twisted unnaturally as he was dragged into the void. He didn't even have time to finish his scream. Rena fired her weapon, but the bullet vanished into nothingness. The creatures didn't flinch. Then the whisper came again. "Earth will hear us." The creatures stepped forward. The ship was dissolving around them, breaking apart into swirling darkness. Elias had seconds. He grabbed the emergency beacon on his wrist, set it to broadcast, and screamed into it. "This is Captain Sayartier, THEYRE coming. Earth, do not let them in." Static swallowed his voice. The ship collapsed. And then there was nothing, just the void and the open door.